Formosa Files is sponsored by the Frank C. Chen Cultural Foundation.
We are so happy to be back with Season 2 of Formosa Files. I'm Eric Michael Smith.
I'm John Ross.
And we want to say a quick thank you to our sponsor for continuing to sponsor Formosa Files. Thank you very much to the Frank Chen Foundation. Appreciate all your support. Okay, so we want to start off this season with a very, very interesting story and one that's not very well told in Taiwan. So it goes back to August 1945. Everybody knows what happened then. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The world is forever changed. And China's supreme leader, Chiang Kai-shek, is in a hurry to join the atomic age. You know, his response was pretty simple. He's like, I want one of those. And this was not just a whim. He established a department for nuclear science. He sought expertise and equipment. But of course, this program would be derailed by part 2 of the Chinese Civil War, or more accurately, losing said war, and fleeing to the fortress island of Formosa.
The next countries to develop nuclear weapons would be the Soviet Union in 1949, the United Kingdom in 1952, France 1960, and then
China in 1964. Now, the nationalists in Taiwan had been monitoring the development of China's atomic program with U-2 surveillance planes from that famous Black Cat Squadron. But the authorities on Taiwan had thought that a bomb was years away from completion. The successful atomic test from China in 1964 came as a pretty nasty shock to Chiang Kai-shek and Taiwan.
At this time, the United States had military advisors and nuclear weapons stationed on Taiwan and on nearby Okinawa, and they'd promised to defend Taiwan against any Chinese invasion. But what if, as Chiang feared, Taiwan was basically wiped out in a single attack?
Yeah, or more realistically, that China having nukes would dissuade the Americans from fulfilling that pledge to defend Taiwan if China invaded, yeah.
Yeah. So President Chiang tried to get U.S. support for a nationalist Chinese military strike against China's nuclear installations. Taiwan would take out China's nuke capabilities, or at least try.
Wow. But the Americans are not so keen on this idea. They're like, yeah, that might lead to World War III. Anybody want World War III? No, we're good. It's worth remembering that it's been just 2 years since the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the USSR and the US almost blew each other to smithereens.
The ROC government, that is, Taiwan's government, decides that if you can't bomb them, you can join them at least. That is, join the nuclear club. Developing its own nuclear weapons will, however, need to be done in complete secrecy. China has warned Taiwan, to paraphrase, if you want your own nukes, think again. We'll take the necessary military action to prevent this.
But despite this, President Chiang Kai-shek ordered a detailed plan to be drawn up.
The plan had a surprising father. For that, I need to jump forward in time. Eric, we're in your hometown of Kaohsiung, and it's early 1988.
Okay.
An Israeli academic is in town for a conference, and he visits the military academy.
I assume you're talking about the ROC Military Academy in Fengshan.
Yep. 2 people in civilian clothing approach him, saying, "We'd like to show you something. Please come with us." They took him to a building and opened a side door. Inside was a large, windowless hall covered in purple velvet with a big portrait hanging on the wall. He says he almost fainted when he saw it.
So this Israeli academic almost fainted when he saw this picture of, who? A man, a woman, what?
Not someone we would recognize, but for an Israeli, instantly recognizable. The man in the picture was Ernst David Bergman, professor called by some the father of the Israeli nuclear program and an important figure in the founding of the State of Israel. He died in 1975 on April 6th.
April 6, 1975, that's just one day after Chiang Kai-shek's death. April 5th is a public holiday. It's Tomb Sweeping Day, Qingmingjie. It's a day to worship or pay respects to ancestors.
Speaking of paying respects, this hall and the picture a kind of shrine to the man because he was the mastermind behind Taiwan's nuclear program, Dr. Ernest David Bergman. German-born and trained scientist, he had left Germany in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. After helping Israel secretly develop a nuclear weapons program, he resigned and continued his work as a private international contractor.
Dr. Ernst David Bergman. So what had he done to earn so much admiration and respect in Taiwan, no less?
Well, as I said, he's in many ways the father of Taiwan's nuclear program. He was an important advisor on that and other military matters too.
Interesting. And I would say more unexpected than you would think, because, yeah, the ROC and Israel were both American allies and still are, but they themselves have never been allied at all. In fact, to this day, I can't send a package to Israel directly from the ROC post office. Israel never established diplomatic relations with the ROC, and Taipei wasn't looking for that. They wanted good relations with the Arab nations because Taiwan at the time was dependent on oil from Saudi Arabia. And in the United Nations, the votes from the Arab nations to block Beijing's admission to the UN were much more important than relations with Israel.
Yes, but Taiwan was interested in acquiring advanced Israeli military technologies. Bergman was invited to Taiwan, a 7-day secret visit in early 1965, the first of many subsequent trips. Important talks were held at the Lalu Sun Moon Lake Hotel, Sun Moon Lake, away from all the American intelligence in Taipei. Lots of CIA there in those days.
Right.
Bergman talked with Chiang Kai-shek and his son, who'd recently been made Minister of Defense, and he'd be put in charge of the nuke program. And Bergman spoke with top military leaders, of course.
So Taiwan's nuke program was to be a near copy of Israel's secret nuclear program, which at the time, Israel was very close to developing its first atomic weapon. Taiwan would follow pretty much the same path, acquire various facilities, a heavy water moderated reactor, heavy water production facility, and plutonium separation plant or reprocessing plant. And
yeah, that's the key one. Yeah.
But these facilities were strictly for peaceful purposes, right? But could be used in an atomic weapons effort.
Yes. So dual track forward, civil and military nuclear development. The first, the civil, to hide the second. Bergman was a chemist, not a nuclear physicist, and did not give detailed technical assistance, but he did give the blueprint and the motivation and useful procurement advice on how to go about buying all the needed equipment.
So, Chiang Kai-shek initiated a secret program called the Xingzhu Project, and he put his son, Jiang Jingguo, in charge. Within the government, support for this program was not actually universal. The chief detractor, Dr. Wu Da-yo, he's a nuclear theoretical physicist and also the country's top science advisor.
Yeah, he was against developing nuclear weapons because of the terrible cost. The country's lack of scientific expertise and the risk it carried of a preemptive PRC strike, which in the worst case scenario would be a nuclear one.
Ouch.
The KMT leaders disagreed and proceeded.
Putting nuclear weapons aside, even if it were just power plants, right, atomic power plants, this would be an incredible expense. And Taiwan's location is really not all that ideal for nuclear power plants. It's a densely populated island, vulnerable to tsunamis, very, very frequently hit by earthquakes, and it's been a potential war zone.
Yes. On Bergman's recommendation, the Zhongshan Institute of Science and Technology was established. This is a large facility located in Taoyuan County, undertaking research on a wide range of weaponry.
And among its divisions was the Institute of Nuclear Research, or INER, which sourced expertise, materials, and equipment from around the world: Israel, the United States, Germany, Canada, France, South Africa, Japan, Norway. This diversified sourcing aimed at keeping INER's real intentions under the radar.
Yes. On Bergman's advice, Taiwan acquired a research reactor from Canada that could produce plutonium suited to developing weapons.
And Taiwan also bought 3 nuclear power plants from the US. Construction of the new facilities for these began in 1971, and commissioning occurred from 1978 through the mid-1980s. 2 of these 3 atomic power plants were up in the far north and have been recently decommissioned after about 40 years of use. The third one, Ma'anshan nuclear power plant in the far south in Pingdong, it's very visible from one of the most famous beaches in Kending, from Nanwan or South Bay, which came online one part in 1984, one part in 1985, and that plant is still running, and they're going to keep running it for a few more years.
As the nuclear weapons program was taking shape, the political landscape was deteriorating. As part of Nixon's 1972 trip to Beijing and China's opening up, Nixon committed to removing U.S. nuclear bombs from Taiwan, and this was completed in 1974. An interesting side note, the Americans did that, taking the bombs off the island with as much stealth as possible. There were fears that some hardline nationalists, angry that the Americans were just about to drop recognition and also pull out the military assistance, that they would grab some nukes.
They were worried that some ROC person would just snatch a few nukes, huh?
Yeah.
But also, Nixon had made some commitments to China about stopping Taiwan from developing its own atomic program, right? The United States stepped up surveillance of INER's efforts, periodically stepping in to block suspicious purchases. But the monitoring in Taiwan was relatively ineffectual because before any overseas inspection teams visited, they gave notice. So, well, I'm coming. So then you hide everything and yeah.
Yes. US President Jimmy Carter put his foot down soon after coming into office. And in 1977, he gave Taipei a series of demands for American oversight. Taiwan's economic and military dependence on the US meant that the authorities had no choice but to accept the demands. Projects that had been uncovered were shut down. However, there were some other undetected activities that continued.
In December 1978, President Carter publicly announced that the United States was switching diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. And as part of this, all U.S. military personnel would be withdrawn from ROC territory.
I've read that around this time, the Chinese and Americans, sharing an interest in stopping Taiwan's nuclear ambitions, started cooperating on intelligence.
Okay, so Taiwan's nuclear weapons program is taking unprecedented heat. But Taiwan's leaders are not going to give up. That first nuclear power station opens in 1978, and the 2 others are being built, right? And they provide very good cover. You just got to be clever. So what threat are they actually facing from American intelligence?
Rather than US agents infiltrating, it was more a matter of recruiting Taiwanese engineers or students when they were studying in or visiting the United States.
And we have some good insights about this from a former nuclear engineer, David He Liwei, but not to be confused with the Taiwanese American AIDS researcher also named David He. So this David he wrote a book in 2015, and it was the first insider account. It was written in Mandarin, but the English title translates to Nuclear Bomb, MIT, a bomb made in Taiwan.
In 1978, David He entered Iowa State University to pursue a doctorate in nuclear engineering. He received a telephone call from a supposed businessman, a Mr. R, he calls him. This Mr. R wanting to know about Taiwan's economic and trade environment.
Because, of course, a physics student is the obvious guy you approach for business info.
Yeah.
That was not the most subtle recruitment approach I can think of.
He informed his military superiors, who told him to go along with the obviously bogus approach and see what happened.
Okay, so in the book, he says the next time that they met Mr. R, the R character asks David about his interests, and David says, I like to go fishing. And this Mr. R says, me too. Oh, why don't we go fishing tomorrow on the lake?
Come morning, there's a luxurious boat with a captain at the helm. Mr. R struggles with hook and line, showing he wasn't as keen on fishing as he claimed. But they caught some fish and then headed in, and on Mr. R's suggestion, had a meal at a yacht club. So some nice food and nice scenery. Mr. R points to the bar where there are two attractive blonde women wearing bikinis. They come over to the table, introduce themselves, suggest going to another bar and having a good time.
So the young scientist suddenly remembers he has some homework to do. He's like, sorry, I would love to. That sounds fun, but I got to go back to my dorm room and crunch some figures and finish a lab report. And in his mind, he thought he had just escaped a trap, specifically a honey trap.
Yeah, unless those girls were attracted to physics experts. He was later directly asked to become an informant by two American men in black, guys in suits and dark sunglasses. A lucrative offer he declined.
After completing his prize-winning doctoral work, He returned to Taiwan to do computer coding, but soon needed to undertake a secret mission back in the U.S. Because Taiwan's nuclear program was a clandestine one, there was no opportunity to test an actual atomic bomb. And John, I can't really think of any place where you could test one in Taiwan as well. Even if it were underground, it would be detected, I think. So anyway, consequently, the Taiwanese needed to rely on computer simulations, but those have their own challenges. And among them, you need a supercomputer. But the United States had placed restrictions on selling supercomputers to Taiwan for obvious reasons. So to circumvent this, He went to the University of California, Berkeley in 1983, supposedly for postdoctoral research, and with the help of a sympathetic professor, was able to access a supercomputer to run computer simulations.
Jumping forward to the morning of January 12, 1988, David He goes to work. His superior, Colonel Jiang Xianyi, does not show up for a scheduled work meeting. They check his house, not there. They check other likely locations, not there. It's as if he's vanished.
And this missing man is pretty important because he's the deputy director of the Institute of Nuclear Research, or INER, and he has a lot of compromising knowledge of Taiwan's secret atomic program. So they can't find him, and Taiwan's leadership starts to panic. This is also terrible timing for this kind of emergency. President Jiang Jing-kuo at this point is right on death's door. In fact, he passes away the very next day. And there were questions. Would a hardliner succeed him? What were the military's plans for the program now? After so many years of undercover work on this atomic thing, it's so close to completion. What now?
Who was this Jiang Xianyi? Born in China, 1943, he'd started working at this military research place in 1967, sponsored his doctoral studies in nuclear engineering at the University of Tennessee from 72 to 76. Once back in Taiwan, he was a rising star, and in 84, at the age of 40, was made a deputy director at INER. That same year, he agreed to be an informant.
He agreed to be a spy for the CIA. Jiang Xianyi says the initial CIA approach was made in 1982 at a conference in the United States. The CIA angle was of safety for the people of Taiwan. And this meshed with Jiang's growing concerns about the danger of acquiring these horrific weapons. Jiang, however, says he wasn't entrapped by the CIA. He says it wasn't some kind of honey trap or a blackmail thing.
Jiang met his CIA handler every few months at a safe house near the Shilin night market in northern Taipei. As well as divulging the latest intelligence, Jiang also handed over photos he'd taken of top secret documents. Sometimes the CIA just wanted him to verify information. Among the topics discussed were systems readiness, procurements of materials and equipment, and future plans.
According to his book, the most memorable intel he gave the CIA was of a project for nuclear weapon delivery. So the Reagan administration had pressured Taiwan to abandon a ballistic missile program, and that had been secretly developed by this Zhongshan Institution of Science and Technology, but it hadn't been developed secretly enough. These Tianma or Skyhorse missiles would be capable of hitting Shanghai, which is 680 kilometers due north. So Zhang explained to the CIA that they had another solution. They weren't going to use missiles. They were going to solve this problem the way the Japanese did in World War II.
Taiwanese engineers were in the process of developing their own fighter called the Indigenous Defense Fighter, itself a response to American reluctance to sell state-of-the-art planes. And this would be, with refitting, able to carry a nuclear bomb. An external fuel tank would be replaced by the bomb. The range would be limited, but it could reach Shanghai one way. These would be no-return kamikaze missions flown by unmarried volunteers.
Wow. But okay, back to the nuke program. So armed with lots of damning evidence to present to the leadership of Taiwan at the time, America decided it's time to act. They feared that an ailing Jiang Jingguo would be succeeded by a military strongman, one able to arm Taiwan with nukes in literally just a couple of short months.
Vice President Lee Teng-hui was in line to succeed. However, Lee, the first native Taiwanese to hold that position, lacked the power and prestige of his predecessor. The Americans had believed Jiang Jingguo's assertions he did not want to fully develop nuclear weapons, only to have the capability to do so quickly. Would Hao Beicun, the head of the military and a potential successor, be as compliant?
Right. So America's about to bring the curtain down on this. They're about to reveal that they know. So they decide the first thing they need to do is get Jiang and his wife, 2 sons and daughter out of the country. First, the CIA had Jiang send his family away to Tokyo Disneyland on a vacation, telling them he would join them later. Jiang, as a high-level military man, needed permission to leave the island. He would sneak out of Kaohsiung International Airport to Hong Kong and then to Seattle using a fake passport.
In Japan, Mrs. Jiang was approached by a female agent who handed her a letter from her husband.
Which was, to say the least, a bombshell. Hi, honey. I'm an intelligence asset for the U.S.
Yeah, before this, she had known nothing of his secret life as a spy. The letter contained instructions to proceed to Seattle, from where the entire family would travel onward to Washington, D.C., arriving on January 12th, one day before Jiang Jingguo passed away and Lee Teng-hui was sworn in as president.
Within a week, the United States had presented Taiwan's leaders with a list of non-negotiable demands for the dismantlement of the country's nuclear weapons program. As the former premier and General Hao Bo-chun wrote in his diary, he said, considering Taiwan-U.S. relations, we have to swallow the insult and let it go. Taiwan couldn't say no, right? Apart from the dependence on American military and economic ties, Taiwan had signed agreements that placed the country's atomic power plants, which then accounted for about a third of Taiwan's power supply, under U.S. leverage.
A team of experts from the United States and the International Atomic Energy Agency descended on Taiwan's nuclear facilities and began their work. Taiwan would not be joining the nuclear weapons club.
So bringing Taiwan's secret nuclear weapons program to an end when it was only just months away from readiness, well, I guess it really avoided what could have been one of the great political crises of the late 20th century.
Yeah, I suppose you could criticize the US government for letting the program go as far as it did, but all's well that ends well. It's good to stop nuclear proliferation.
Right, yeah, and the spy and his family were safely extracted. There was a fast and rather thorough crackdown on all the nuclear facilities, and it was all done without embarrassing Taiwan or causing long-term damage to the US-Taiwan relationship. So, John, any follow-up for this man, Jiang, who helped bring down Taiwan's nuke program?
He was given a job at a nuclear research institute in Idaho. He retired in 2013 and wrote a book about his role in this nuclear adventure, published in Mandarin and in Taiwan, no less, a testament to the freedom of press on this beautiful island.
Speaking of books, John, you generally have some recommendations. Got some for this one?
Yes, Taiwan's former nuclear weapons program, Nuclear Weapons on Demand, by David Albright and Andrea Stricker, and a second book, Crossing the Red Line, Consequences of Taiwan Emergence as a Nuclear Proliferant. That's by Taiwan-based journalist Alan Patterson, who worked closely with David He.
John, you're a bit modest because we should also add your book, Taiwan in 100 Books, because we drew quite heavily from that book for today's episode.
Thank you.
Well, once again, we just want to thank everybody for joining us for season 2, and we've got so many great stories coming your way. I'm Eric Michael Smith. Thanks for listening.
I'm John Ross. Bye.